Our next speaker is Maral Kurkjian. She studied psychology in Greece and in France, and she's currently working as a school psychologist in Greece. She will be speaking about identity construction of Armenian adolescents in France, the effects of cultural socialization in school and in family context. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. Okay, so this study was realized as part of my master thesis in child and adolescent psychology in 2012. And so what we wanted to examine was how the parental practices of cultural socialization and the contact with a peer group in an Armenian and the French school context contributed to the adolescents' identity choices in terms of their two orientations, Armenian and French. So the existing works focused only on the ethnic identity of minority adolescents, and either the family context or the peer group influence. And what we did was we included in our research not only the Armenian identity, but also the French identity and the identity profiles that result from combining the two cultural orientations. And we also compared the family to the social context, meaning the friends. So adolescence is a critical developmental period for the identity construction of a person. According to Erikson, there are questions that need to be answered by the adolescent. Who am I? Where do I come from? And where am I going to? So a part of the identity construction task for the adolescent that belongs to an ethnic minority group is, first of all, identifying, trying to construct an identity of this ethnic group, the ethnic identity. At the same time, he will try to identify to the dominant culture and construct a national identity. The family and the social context contribute both to this task. The family contributes through the process of cultural socialization, which is the transmission of heritage, of history, tradition from the parents to the children. At the same time, the social context through the peer group, meaning the friends that become very important in adolescence, also contribute. Our population were 90 adolescents of Armenian origin, aged 12 to 16, from two different school contexts. So we had a group that attended an Armenian bilingual school every day, and we had a group that attended French schools every day and then had Armenian weekly classes. Okay. So they filled out questionnaires that measured, first of all, their identity choices. We used the multi-group ethnic identity measure to measure the ethnic identity, obviously. Then, in order to measure the identification to the dominant group and to the origin group, we used a scale with these diagrams that you can see. So the adolescents had to choose which one of these diagrams represented how much included they felt in the French group or the Armenian group. And then we asked them to choose one of the four identity profiles that concern the navigation between the two orientations. So they could either choose the hyphenated identity, I feel French Armenian, the dominant identity, I feel exclusively French or I feel exclusively Armenian. The context-specific identity, I feel French or I feel Armenian, but that depends on the situation. And the citizen of the world identity, which is I feel French, I feel Armenian, but most of all, I am a citizen of the world. What we did, we also measured the participants' perception of the parental practices in the family. We conducted interviews, first of all, with parents of Armenian origin to define the general themes that connect specifically to the Armenian family, so what happens in the Armenian family, to pass on the traditions, the heritage. And then we constructed a questionnaire and used OIL's indicators to do that, which are territory, history, culture, everyday practices, religion, language, and partner choice. We also measured the peer group origin with 2 questions concerning the origin of the participants' friends in order to verify that the school context corresponds to the peer group they are friends with, and we included demographic questions. So I'll pass to the results. We can see a chart here. If we look at the last set of columns that's written identification to the French, we can understand actually that adolescents in the French school context, the red column, identify more to the French compared to their peers that go to an Armenian school and have Armenian friends. The Armenian identity, on the other hand, was strong for the whole sample, as we can see in the other 2 sets of columns where we see no difference between the 2 colors. We also did a correlation and saw that there is no relation between the 2 identities, meaning that it is possible to identify to the French and not have a less stronger Armenian identity. So it's possible to maintain both orientations at the same time. Okay, here there's nothing, great. So we did a factor analysis of the parental practices, and that revealed 5 areas of parenting patterns, which are the only ones you can see in the table, which wasn't like this. So we have 5 areas of parenting patterns in the Armenian family that turn around language, religion, ideology, cultural knowledge, future planning and future project towards Armenia, and conviviality, which is a traditional family life that promotes togetherness, getting together frequently, doing things together, etc. So what we could see on the table is that the conviviality practices and the cultural practices influenced positively the ethnic identity. So that means that the fact that parents insisted on transmitting basic cultural knowledge and insisting on creating a convivial family environment, that could predict the fact that the adolescents had a stronger Armenian identity. What we didn't predict was a negative relationship between certain parental practices like language, idolatry, religion, and conviviality, and the identification to the French. In other words, the more the adolescents thought that in their family, the Armenian language, the conviviality, the traditions, the religion were present, the less they seemed to identify to the French. So the French identity formation is not only a question of peer group influence, of friends influence, of school influence, but also a question of the familial practices. Okay, I'll skip this as well. I'll go here, and here we can see we have actually the 2 school contexts, the Armenian and the French one. And our results showed that the adolescents in an Armenian school context reported having a family context that had a very specific parenting practices pattern of future planning and of ideology, religion, which is much more intense than those that frequented a French school. So these children reported that their parents defended the Armenian cause, supported choice of Armenian partner, maintained the religion, and planned a future towards Armenia. And we could suppose that these parents make a very conscious choice of sending their children to an Armenian daily school, a choice that results from this ideology and is in agreement with their ethnic and cultural values. So In conclusion, we can see that the familial and the social context is very important in the adolescent's identity construction and negotiation process. The parents maintain their central role in the ethnic identity formation task during adolescence, but it was observed that developing each cultural orientation and navigating between them was also a question of parental practices. However, being in contact with a non-Armenian peer group, with the French group in this case, seemed to contribute to the formation of the national identity, but didn't impede the adolescents from identifying to the Armenian ethnic group that they belong to. Attention should be paid, however, to the interpretation and generalization of the data, mostly concerning the two peer group context, because, first of all, the samples repetition in groups doesn't reflect the reality of the Armenian community in France. If you remember here, we saw that there were more participants going to an Armenian bilingual school and less going to French schools. We had no official data to consult for the number of adolescents that attend each type of schools, but we think it's most probably the other way around, at least in France or Ile-de-France. And moreover, it's very important to know that the perception and the contact with the whole society peer group is different for each country of the diaspora, for each community. And finally, the parental context influence is not only a question of cultural socialization practices, it is also a question of the family dynamics in terms of communication and the relationship among the members of the family, which plays a big part in the transmission process. So these limitations and observations could be taken into consideration for future studies. Thank you.
Thank you.